Welcome to the Depths of Motherhood podcast, the show that is ready to go deep into the exploration of raising wildlings in today's world and how to tap into your innate wisdom. Hosted by Danielle Baker, a Women's Circle facilitator, doula, and passionate mother. Danielle welcomes guests onto the show who are dedicated to positively influencing the world of pregnancy, birth, parenting, and humaning in general. Join us to debunk the myths and reveal truths that will realign you back to your true nature. Mothering in today's world may seem overwhelming at times. This podcast aims to cut through the noise to share with you information to support you on your journey.
Welcome everybody to the Depths of Motherhood podcast. I'm your host, Danielle. This week, another Danielle joins us on the show. Welcome, Danielle.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. We made it. I'm so happy. We've been in touch for a long time, following each other's journey, and now we get to sit with each other. So I'm really happy about that. Before we drop in and hear all about your story, I'd love for you to share with the listeners where you are and who you're a mummy to and what you're doing in your spare time.
So we currently right now are in the south of England, and I am a mummy to my 3-year-old daughter, Rosie. I can't believe she's 3. I feel like all parents say that, but when I say it out loud, it's like, oh, she's 3 now. Yeah. So yeah, that's me. I'm a yoga teacher, meditation teacher. And I don't normally say this because I think it's a little bit because it's not my career, but because it is to do with parenting, I think it's quite important. I'm a military wife, so that does affect parenting. So yeah.
I want to get all into that with you. That's like a whole, wow.
Yeah.
I was also in the military before. So this could have been my path too, to be there, but
yeah.
Your partner's in the military, right? Does he work close to you, or is he working away right now?
At the moment, he's here for the next 3 weeks, but he's just about to go away for 4 months. So
wow. That's a whole of the spin on things, isn't it? And thank you for putting it out there, because it puts a lot into perspective about your life as well. It's massive. And do you live close to family, or?
Luckily right now we do, which I'm super grateful for, because we've had periods of time where we haven't, but since having my daughter, we have managed to stay relatively close to them. And I think I would be completely lost without that, because effectively when they go away, you turn into a solo parent. So yeah, but we're navigating it.
I'm really happy that you have support near you. It means so much. So let us drop into this space. If you feel comfortable to close your eyes, that would be great. And just notice your breath for a moment. See if your breath is moving to all areas of your body, or if it's getting locked in somewhere. And just notice without trying to change it. And as you continue to observe the breath, notice how it dances into different areas. And tuning into your womb space. Just breathe deep into your womb. And as we're here, just giving thanks to your womb for everything she has done, that she has held you through, and create some space to allow your story to come through, for you to be a channel for your experience and for your words to allow the story to manifest into the world. Welcome back into this space, and I would love to hear your story, your birth story or your motherhood story, whatever wants to come through today.
I think my birth story is something, I feel like that is obviously where it all started. And for me, it was completely different to how I had originally intended, or now in hindsight, when I say planned, seems like I could never have planned it, but was completely different to how I had hoped it would go. But obviously now 3 years on, I always reflect back and I think, God, it taught me so much about myself. So I think almost as each year goes, I feel like I learn or get something more from it. So yeah, should I just start from the beginning of birth?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Like whatever, if you want to go, if it's pregnancy that wants to come through first and lead in, whatever you feel.
Okay. Well, I think so. I had envisioned that I was going to be this like beautiful, like earth mum that was going to just absolutely love pregnancy. And I was only about 6 to 8 weeks pregnant, and I had really bad morning sickness. Well, it wasn't even morning, it was like all day sickness. And I just thought, oh gosh, like this is not what I had thought I was going to feel, or almost what I had maybe been told by other people that should feel. So I found pregnancy quite hard. And towards the end, mentally, I found it really difficult. She was a January baby, so obviously we were in winter. So I think that didn't help because we had like dark mornings and dark nights. And I just felt like I wanted to like hibernate, and I was so uncomfortable. Yeah, I think what I thought of pregnancy was going to be for me was the complete opposite. So I was like, oh, and I think that almost scared me a little bit because I thought, all I ever wanted to do was be a mum. And I thought, I was going to really enjoy it, but I didn't. And then you felt really guilty for not enjoying it. And for a few years afterwards, I always felt guilty saying that out loud because how many people that's all they want. So I always felt really guilty. But I think it's really important to share because when I was in it, I felt like the worst human and the worst mother on the world for not feeling grateful or well. So, I mean, I didn't have anything too complicated, just the sickness and the tiredness. But yeah, so pregnancy was a little tricky. And then closer to the birth, so her due date was actually New Year's Day. So the closer, like as soon as Christmas happened, I could tell the midwives were a bit like almost now trying to like, come on, let's like get this baby out. And I was like, well, hang on a minute. Like we're not even at her due date. On her due date, I was offered the sweep. And again, like in hindsight now, I would have done things completely different. But I think because mentally where I was in the pregnancy, I was like, I just can't do this anymore. I just feel like in hindsight, I didn't have the support to know that, she hasn't got to come on that day that somebody told you on some scan, like you've not done anything wrong if she doesn't come then. So I had that on her due date and then nothing. And then I was getting really fed up, and my husband said to me, he'd taken the time off work, and he said to me, right, let's go to the beach because it's like my place. He's a really keen photographer, so he went to do like a sunrise shoot. And I just tagged along, waddled along with him. But it was so beautiful. He was shooting the sunrise and I was just like sort of back from him, just watching it. And I remember, it almost makes me feel emotional thinking about it. But I just remember thinking to myself, and I don't even know if it's thinking to myself, I think it's like a higher power, like a voice. I was like, I am ready now. We are ready. Like we can do this together. And I just remember the sun just coming up and I was like, we're good. Like this is going to happen. That night, so we went, that was like 6 o'clock in the morning, the midnight that night at literally 1:00 midnight, my waters broke in bed naturally. And yeah, obviously like first baby, you're a bit like, well, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. There was a little bit of panic that set in. And we rang the hospital and they were like, you can come in, but you probably got a while. So if you can try and rest and stay at home. I managed to go back to sleep. Everything was fine. And this is where it gets a little blur. My story gets a little bit like, I don't know fully if I can remember everything in like chronological order. I know I'm like darting about a bit here, but a year after birth, I had some Reiki and some healing. And I realized I had quite a lot of birth trauma, which is why I can't put it together in like a proper timeline. So forgive me if it sounds a bit like scatty. So what I remember is then the following evening, or the evening of the waters break-in, I started to get some contractions. So I went in, and my original plan, like I think you have it at like the 10-week checkup. They're like, do you have a birth plan? And I said I really wanted a home birth, but I was really discouraged by the midwife. Like, first baby, she might be safer in hospital. Like, literally was just not even going to entertain the idea. And now, like, if we're blessed enough to have another one, I know that for me personally, I feel safer at home. So that would be where I would hope to have the next one. But anyway, we ended up going into hospital. It was so busy that evening, we got put in like a little side triage room. But actually, it was quite nice. It was like a little cave, and I had like my incense on. I had all my little, you can't have proper candles, but like my little tea lights and my clary sage. And I felt really good and I felt really safe. But again, in this blooming plan, I'd put down that I'd hope to have a water birth. So I think I got to like 3 centimeters, and they were like, oh, the water birth room's ready if you want to move. They moved me, and obviously it was a bigger room. It was bright white light, and it smelled of bleach. And there was something in my body that I think I went from feeling quite safe and quite secure to my body just completely freezing. So much so, this is where it gets a bit, like, timelines gets a bit fuzzy. But I remember going into that room, and I had so I had that whole evening in that room, and I was sat up on the bed, and I can remember seeing my husband asleep in the chair, and I don't think I moved for a while, because my midwife that I had at the beginning, she went off shift, and then I remember seeing her at 9 o'clock the next morning. So I must have been checked on. I obviously wasn't left, but something in me just froze, and we had no contractions, we had no movement, like everything just stopped. So then come 9 o'clock, the next morning, I had to have the induction, where they put the hormone drip in you to basically get everything going. And that was and again, I always feel really uncomfortable saying it was traumatic, because I know people have a lot worse, but, it was a traumatic feeling for me, because I then couldn't move. I was like strapped to a bed. I couldn't have the water birth. I wasn't even really allowed to stand up. I asked if I could at least stand in the shower to have the like water on my back. I couldn't even do that. So I was basically told, you need to lay on the bed. And like all the studies that I've looked at afterwards, obviously that's like one of the most trickiest places to try and give birth, because you're going against like gravity. And they couldn't quite get the hormone like right. Like sometimes it would be like really, really powerful, and sometimes I wouldn't be feeling anything. And again, I'd hoped to have it without any medication, but I got to the point, I think I'd had like 2 paracetamol at this point, and the midwife was like, you don't earn a medal if you don't have anything. And I was like, I know, but I just didn't want to have that. Anyway, I ended up having the Gathanier. And then again, it was all a bit of a blur. I remember I'd been pushing for 2 hours, and they said to me, if you don't have her in the next 20 minutes, we're going to have to take you down to have an emergency cesarean. And that was just like, mm-mm. And I remember, this is one of the things I really remember. I remember thinking, that is not happening. Like for me, I'm not doing it. And I managed in the 20 minutes between me and Rosie, we managed to move her down a centimeter, and and I needed to turn her. So I managed to turn her, which again, I always think, God, that's so like, my mind is, your mind is so powerful to what is going on with your body, because I was like, that's not happening. Like, I'm just choosing not to believe that's even an option for me. Yeah. And I did have some complications. I had to have an episiotomy, so they had to cut me, and she had a kiwi birth, where they put the cup on their head. That was really traumatic, because somebody was literally like pulling. But yeah, I just think and then luckily she was all fine, she was all well, and she came. But those things that happened, from the standing on the beach to, yeah, I'm ready, to her being on my chest, And I always feel really guilty saying this, but again, for the point of hoping it will help somebody else, I think I'd had so much trauma for me personally in that time. When she was placed on my chest, there was that like, oh my God, like complete relief and like, I love you so much. But I remember they said to skin that she needs to be like, they have to have an hour solid skin to skin before my husband could hold her. And I remember like clock watching, like, I just want to get her off me, which saying out loud, I feel awful, but I just want people to know if they feel like that, and I have spoken to a few women previously that have had similar, but I think I had so many doctors, midwives, people cutting me, pulling me. I was just like completely overwhelmed, overstimulated that I couldn't, you know, I couldn't even have that. And I was really lucky. I don't think, you know, I didn't end up having sort of any postpartum sort of depression or anything. I don't think it affected the bond, and I managed to, or between Rosie and I and the support from my family, it managed to not affect anything else. But I do always worry and wonder, that could have gone quite differently because of the experience. And I have, like I mentioned, she got to about a year, and I saw a lady that she's actually trained, she does hypnobirthing and she does Reiki. She does a lot with women's health. And she did some Reiki on me, and she was the first. She said to me, like, talk to me about your birth journey, your breastfeeding journey, which was another like story all in itself. But she was the first person that I felt, one, honored the fact that yes, I could have trauma from it, because you're sort of taught, I think, I don't know if it's an English thing, but well, your baby's here, you're both happy and healthy, like, just get on with it. Like, what are you complaining about, basically? She was the first person that allowed me to feel the feelings, and then I was able to process it, because up until then I was just not, I was just like shutting it all down, and that was manifesting in my relationship with my husband and, all sorts of things. So yeah, I think being able to say quite freely that I had birth trauma is quite a big thing for me to say. And I really encourage other women, like, if that has happened to them, for me, it was allowing myself to have that, to feel that, and not feel the guilt of that, like I'd done something wrong. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I have some things that I want to ask as well, but I just want to say, wow, like
Mm.
you went through this whole journey and you've had the strength to be able to really see yourself and meet yourself and honor everything that's coming up against like everything that you've been told, or what is expected from you as a mother who's just given
Mm.
birth. And so
Mm.
that is massive and takes a lot of strength. And being here today, 3 years later, and sharing this is huge, because
Mm.
it's still something that's moving you and it helps you. And it's like driving you to see the world differently. Like, it's changed
Mm.
your whole perspective on things. It sounds like
Mm.
you were just about to touch onto breastfeeding. How was that?
So I don't know in hindsight if it's the trauma of the birth that, or, and also I've done a lot of reading on how the trauma of, or researching on how the trauma of the birth can affect the child. And I think that definitely has something, well, I personally feel it has something to play with it. But I remember feeding her in the hospital, and I just knew, I thought, doesn't feel right. Like, I don't feel like this is correct. But the midwives that were there were like, no, like, it's all fine. And I just thought, listening to my instinct, I was like, this doesn't feel right. And the day before we went home, so I think we stayed in for one night. The day before we went home, I actually asked to speak like a breastfeeding. I don't actually know what they call them, but somebody who's,
Lactation?
yes, somebody within the hospital that
Uh-huh.
is that specializes in it. So they come and checked and watched how I was feeding. And again, they said, no, it's all fine. And I just remember thinking, this doesn't, I don't know what it was supposed to feel like, but I just knew in my gut that this wasn't right. And I didn't feel like she was getting enough, and she would fall asleep on the boob. And I was like, this just isn't right. Anyway, we ended up going home because I was told and reassured that it was all fine. And then I was trying to like breastfeed her at home, bearing in mind I had, and again, I'd listened to a lot of podcasts and done this and done a bit of research, but because I had the name of it's gone out of my head, where they cut you. Oh,
Episiotomy.
episiotomy, that's it.
No, it's
That
the
kind of,
biggest word in history as well.
yes, yes. Because I'd had that. Some women say that I've had that. They have also struggled to breastfeed because of you can't sit. So you're uncomfortable to sit. So, and I wasn't really taught how to breastfeed while I was laying because I was told that was sort of unsafe. But anyway, so I think that affected it. Anyway, we got home, and I think whatever the next day of the midwife check was, like the third day, she come in and her weight had dropped like under what it should be. And the midwife said, "Oh, I think you should top her up with some formula or else she'll have to go back into hospital." And I was like, as a new mum, I was like, "What? Wait, what?" And I got her to check how I was breastfeeding. She said, "No, it seems all okay," but she would just fall asleep and like not take enough. Anyway, we did in the end I ended up pumping, so I knew how much, so I could tell them, so I knew how much Rosie was getting. And then we did top her up with formula, and even that, like, that has a whole guilt side to it for me. I remember going to like our first baby class, the baby massage class. And I think I was everybody else was breastfeeding, and I was the only one formula feeding, and I felt really embarrassed to feed her with a bottle. I felt like I'd done something like awful. So yeah, I always like to mention that, because I think that was a huge thing for me, even feeding her in public, which I know people have that when they breastfeed, but I felt like I had to feed her in the car because I felt like I'd done something wrong. But this was obviously all my expectation of what I had hoped, motherhood or our journey would have been. So yeah, and then I sort of pumped and then formula fed her, and I was just exhausted. Like, by the time I'd finished pumping, and then with a newborn, once you've changed and winded, she was really colicky, and literally had like 5 minutes, and then she was feeding, and then the whole cycle would just go on, and it just felt relentless. And I had this is for one of the really positive things, a really lovely health visitor that sort of said to me, I think she could see that mentally it was taking a toll on me, and she said, "Don't have to do this. Like, if she's feeding well on the formula, and you're happier and you're getting more sleep on the formula, then you do not have to force yourself." She's like, "I can hear," and because obviously you have to tell them your routine. She said, "I can hear and tell that you're exhausted, so don't feel you have to do it." And she said, "Don't just think about it. It's just just an option. But you're doing fine if you want to carry on what you're doing." And I remember she left my house, and I burst into tears, and I just thought, I'm just not doing it. Like, I just can't do it anymore. So yeah, that was our breastfeeding experience.
Thank you for sharing all this. And it just
Mhm.
makes me think of, this journey that you and your daughter were on was meant for you both, for
Mhm.
whatever realizations have come through it, for whatever was needing to be experienced. And it's such a lot, dealing with our expectations and the world's expectations. And it just takes them angels like your health visitor to look at you and see you as a
Mm.
human being, as a mother, and say, you need rest too, instead of just, going by the books or looking at what we're supposed to say, but really seeing the mother and the baby and like, how can
Yeah.
we support that? That's the most important thing.
Mhm.
Wow. So what would you say to your younger self? If you could go back, what would you say to her
Mm.
whilst you were pregnant?
So the biggest thing that I take from it is trust I feel like my intuition is really strong, but I can get quite swayed off by somebody else's thought or opinion. But all these things, like the birth situation, the breastfeeding situation, I feel like if I had, one, spoken up for myself more and advocated for myself, and two, if I'd have, yeah, so they're linked. So trusted myself that I know, even though it was the first time I had been pregnant or the first time I was giving birth, that I know, I still know. And yeah, it's trusting, having that self-confidence and being able to speak up. I wish I'd just felt more brave to question the medical system.
Oh, breathing into that.
Mhm.
And it's only on the other side, right? Because I think
Mhm.
there's just a subconscious belief that they're going to do what's best for you, for your interest, for you as a mother, for the baby. And as we can see in this story, there's things to be met on their side, deadlines and
Yep.
quotas and things like that.
Mhm.
And it's just amazing that you can sit here today and you can say all that to your younger self and you've had that experience. And I think, childbirth can be so humbling in ways that we're never going to understand. And
Yep.
we also can, from hearing your story, it's just an amazing reminder for people supporting mothers to
Mhm.
be very aware of what they're saying. Like, are you saying something because it's a pattern? Like, oh, well, at least you and baby are okay, like you
Mhm.
survived,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that's something I also heard too, was like, well, somebody down the road, they just gave birth and had forceps. And I'm like, oh yeah, I shouldn't share my story. Like, it's not worthy to be heard. But the
Mhm.
thing is, every story is different and every story deserves to have a voice because it supports us in it's like moving forward, but actually coming back like to what we know already, right? It's like
Mhm.
we do know it, but actually we know it so deeply within our bones, but our subconscious is so like intertwined with the stories that we've been told that especially when we're pregnant and giving birth, especially, it's
Mhm.
like them fears come up and it's like you cling on to the thing that you're so used to trusting, which is the system. And it's like
Yeah.
you might have this voice, but it gets muffled. And like you said about, timeline shifting, it's really hard for you to like fully remember what happened clearly, and that
Mhm.
is like because we are open, we're so expansive, and we're here, there, and everywhere, backwards and forwards in our
Mhm.
reality. And we trust when we're in that space where we like trust that someone has our best interests. And unfortunately, that's not coming from fear. What I'm about to say is not coming from fear, but it's truth. We hear these stories and we're like, okay, this is our story and we can learn from it. So it's like
Mhm.
almost like the guilt is worthy to be sat with because it shows us exactly where it is that we could have like seen something different. Not really though at the time because we only had what we knew, but now if something
Mm.
was to happen as we share the story.
Yep.
I was sat with this yesterday, like, what is guilt? Like, because I could say, oh, well, I have guilt over this, but maybe it was meant to happen that way. Or actually sitting with guilt and being like, what is the depths of that guilt? Like, what is underneath
Mm.
that? What is it that I really needed and could have asked for if I had the right information? And that's it. And
Mhm.
I love like social media so much if you're following the right people because you get that in bite-sized pieces or just enough
Yep.
to take you on a trip to learn something else. And
Mhm.
we're doing this as mothers, as families, as fathers as well, just learning more and more about our body so that we can make decisions and also just share
Mm.
with people, speak to people so they have more choice.
Definitely. Definitely. I think sharing has been the biggest healer for me, like sharing my story. And like I said, the lady that I went to have the Reiki with, I do think, where would I be now if I had never had that?
Mm.
If I had never been, like you said, never been seen
Yeah.
and been allowed to accept
Mm.
how I felt. So,
Yeah. Because
mm,
so many people, when you sit and tell a story, they want to fix something. They don't want you to feel the pain.
mhm,
So they want to normalize it. And what's like obvious as we look at what's happening in our society, when we normalize things, we suppress it. So it's like having the courage to share. And also, if you're the one listening, to sit with it without trying to change it and just letting it be as it is. And if you don't have words, that's okay. I think we're in a society where we think we have to give feedback and we have to give something back, where we can just sit there and be like, I see you, I love you. That's it. That's enough. That's enough.
Definitely. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Danielle, for being here and sitting with us. Me right now, but everyone else in the future. Like all of us, all of my personalities. And
Thank
I
you
hope
so
that
much.
you have a beautiful evening. And yeah, you're about to put your daughter to bed now, right?
I am, yeah. I'm going to do a bath and read a story and then go.
Oh, give her a big hug from me and thank her too. Her story as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
We did it.